Just as all mythologies begin with the one and the rupture of the one, the separation of the whole and from the whole, so every mythology has the demonic world and the angelic world. Now, this polarity can be communicated with many languages and in different ways, but there's the sense of descent, and the fallen ones, whether it's Lucifer or demons or whatever you'd like to call it, the devil. At the bottom, separate from the whole, you have the rebel. You have the identity of the one in opposition with the whole or the higher one. And this is a central theme in mythology, which is the language, the code book for exploring the human psyche. All myths emerge out of the psyche as a way, much like personal and global dreams, to understand and relate to the psyche. They are not real without the observer and measuring device of the human mind to generate, perceive, and respond to them. So what are we talking about when we talk about the higher consciousness and the lower consciousness, the heavenly hosts and the demonic realms? Well, one of the things that we're talking about is the life cycle at different stages. In order for new life to be born, a child, for example, they must eventually differentiate from the mother and the womb and be distinct. If there's an exact copy and the child is the mother just a little bit smaller and grows up and lives the life of the mother, the thoughts of the mother, etc., then the diversity and success agenda of life is thwarted, because life is in the business of winning. And if you want to win with a deck of cards, have 5 or 6 decks of every card. And no matter what context presents itself in the game, you'll always have the winning card, because you have options, because you have diversity. And nature has won, if we pay attention to scientists. Some billions of years ago, 20 or so, life didn't exist at all. It came out of nothing, and in an instant created a little dense pea that rapidly expanded. And out of the very simple algorithms and patterns of energy in that little pea, has slowly, using nature's algorithm, evolved more than 1 billion life-compatible planets as we understand life in our universe alone, and counting. Maybe in another 20 billion years, there will be billions more of the many complex relationships we call planets or comets, etc. There will be more and more. In other words, nature is in the diversity business. And the more diverse the environment, and the more diverse the particles or individuated patterns in that environment, the higher the odds that some of them are going to grow into more and more complex forms of life. Diversity is nature's trump card. Diversity is the way that nature always wins, no matter what happens. Because if you've got 10 billion lotto tickets, and a 10-digit number or 20-digit number is read out, one of them is bound to win. But nature's got more than 1 billion planets in one universe or alone that we've discovered so far. And they're all in the business of creating life. The first step of life is differentiation. The amoeba forms into 2 cells, into 8 cells, it splits and splits and splits and splits and splits. And the more it splits, the more distinct from one another. It starts off with stem cells, but then they don't stay stem cells. Some cells evolve into the liver. Some cells evolve into a pancreas. Some cells evolve into finger cells, and on it goes. And diversity is the foundation of complex life. And the more diversity that is available, the more complex life forms can emerge out of that relationship. So nature's game, life's game, is individuation, is separation, is uniqueness, which leads to greater and greater diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of feelings, diversity of circumstances, diversity of ecological environments, diversity of bodies, diversity of sexual preferences, diversity of political preferences, diversity in paradigms and dogmas. All of these things diversify. And although in times of crisis and survival, the common is held most dear, meaning in a hurricane, we forget our political differences and we remember that we're human. Because if we don't come together and we don't survive by recognizing our common humanity, then the uniqueness of those political ideas die with us. We come together in times of crisis and tragedy, and in times of success and abundance, we diversify. We become more and more unique. And one or more of those uniquenesses will evolve into a complex and more complex form of life, a more intelligent form of life. Not all of it, but it is only the human ego that identifies with this particular pattern. Life identifies with all of it. A win of any part of life into a more complex form is emergent life, is a win for life. Just like if we have 1 billion lotto cards and numbers, and one is read out, and one of them is the winning one, that's all we need. The other ones fall by the wayside. Now, to the human ego, identified with all those other ones, this is a catastrophe. This is a challenge to survival and a call to innovate. With fear, with pain, with manipulation, with shame, we try to respond in different ways to make sure that we can win, that our number can win, either by mutating into a new identity. Okay, that number didn't win, let me try this number. Can I win if I identify with this one? We all want to identify with a winning number. But it takes an evolutionary process, if we're not going to go insane or schizophrenic, to evolve, to grow from where the identity that we are here to this new identity that is the winning number. We don't quite feel good about just saying, okay, cancel all my memories, all my beliefs, all my dearly held values. I'll just throw them all out the window, and this one is popular today, so I'll be this. If we don't know how we got from there to here, we can lose the cohesion of our pattern. There's nothing to hold it in place. Our identity just changes constantly based on a majority of other people. It's not self-initiated and self-originated and self-sustained, which means it's a weaker form of identity than one that is built out of conviction and experience and belief and can be held and can withstand the different pressures in the environment, much like a 200-year-old oak tree must survive the 100-year storm, or it doesn't exist. For a 200-year-old oak tree to exist, it has survived the worst weather, the most extreme challenges in 200 years. Or there is no 200-year-old oak tree. And so that is a higher win, so to speak, to be able to evolve into a form that can relate to and sustain and partner with ecology for a long time. Now, in the separation from the whole and the movement towards the one, the individual in relationship, in initial opposition, because the child starts to push away from its mother, maybe 6, 7 years old, and wants to go out into dad's world as a way of differentiating to create space so that something unique can develop rather than a copy. And as that grows into understanding more of the outer world and more of performance-based love in dad's world, we then eventually have a rebellion from dad's world as well. Like, I want to find my own space. I want the chance, I want the space, unpressurized from the larger energy patterns around me, to find my own pattern, my own energy signature, distinct from everything else. At that moment, an individual is born. At that moment, life has another potentially winning lotto ticket in her hand, because it is possible that all the other unique combinations would not quite unlock the potential, the probability field in the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that would lead to new life, that would lead to a higher form of intelligence, a higher form of grace. Now, all nature asks is that it be unique, that it be individual. And in the game of chance, in the game of possibility and probability, becoming actuality, we play a role in determining if that unique signature is the one that unlocks a unique form in the way that it synergizes and partners with other things, or if it is a signature that in its interaction with the environment fails. And as identity fails, as the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being fails, as it dies, the self, the psyche, doesn't die. In a healthy evolution, a new identity will be born. A new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing will emerge out of the endless possibility field within the psyche of each person, through imagination, through learning, through exposure. A unique synergy will come together, another iteration, another offering to the possibility field of the ecology to see, will this one unlock the door? This one opens a path to here and here and here, but it hits a doorway we don't know how to open. This one opens up to here and here and here, and there's a corridor into the unknown. Is it safe enough to enter? Is it too big of an unknown possibility field so we walk back into more familiar terrain? What happens as we interact with possibility, the possibility of identity and the possibility of our environment creating probabilities and eventually actualities? What happens? Well, getting back to the theme, nature began with reptiles, and reptiles are cold-blooded. They don't have feelings, they don't have empathy, they have fight, flight, freeze, and in the human version, they have please, fight, flight, freeze, and please, meaning if I can't beat you, if I can't run from you, if freezing is not working very well, can I please you? Can I seduce you into doing something for me? And so you have a fear-based survival coping mechanism of, I will please the one that I am afraid of. It's a human iteration of the reptilian brain, built with overlays of rationality and observing that the alpha reptile in a sociopathic system needs certain things to be met, has desires for pleasure and power and the like, and in a sycophantic relationship, perhaps I can be useful and have value to the extent that I am useful to a sociopathic reptile who has more power, more access to resources than I do. So in the demonic paradigm, we're in the face of the reptilian brain. Now, the reptilian brain is the most isolated identity that there is, because there is no empathy, there is no acknowledgement of the one. The sociopathic state is the state that exists when all ties to the whole are severed empathically. There is the need to survive, there is the need to feel security in that survival, there is the need for pleasure, but it is dissociated from the empathic brain, from the transcendent brain. And so it is dissociated from empathy and from transcendence. One cannot love, empathize with, attune with a reptile from the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain, in its extreme dissociation from everything, is the beginning of individuation. Meaning, as one descends from the unconscious connection to all that is, or the unconscious connection with mother, in the differentiation process, there is a place where the empathic bonding of doing whatever mother needs, whatever the group needs, whatever all that is dictates, to, no, I'm going to do what I dictate. And there is a distinction drawn at that point, a separation, a betrayal of sorts. Thank you very much for life, mother, planet, all that is, thank you. But I'm not going to follow that pattern any longer. I'm going to find my own pattern, the hero's journey, which often begins with calamity, the journey into the unknown. At that point, there is complete separation that is necessary in order for a new pattern of life to emerge. But at that reptilian level of that individual brain, it is completely sociopathic. And much like an anesthetized dental operation, where your teeth can chew on your cheek, your teeth can chew away and can literally bite a hole right through this cheek. Just push it in, take a bite. You feel absolutely nothing. So there's a certain kind of freedom in dissociation, in the reptilian brain, in the consciousness of someone or something in a sociopathic state where all empathic ties are severed. And you find something unique emerging out of that consciousness. It's not good for them or them or them or the planet or anything else in particular, unless that's random. It's good for the unique life form. Now, in children who are born in a very transcendent state of consciousness in many cases, whether they stay in that Buddha-like place or descend into the reptilian brain, which is the foundation of human evolution and consciousness, we grew from the reptilian state into the mammalian state and then into the human state through brain development. The algorithm of the reptile is designed to withstand and ensure that life, that individual life, continues even in a hostile environment. And so when you have reptilian parents who are incapable of empathizing with what it's like to be 10 pounds and completely dependent, and they find it interesting to put cigarette butts on the feet of that child and see what happens if you pour a beer in and molest that child. When the parent is in a sociopathic state, the corresponding sociopathic state develops in the child, who learns that they are surrounded by reptiles and that in order to survive as an individual life form, they must dissociate from empathy, because if they empathize with reptiles and the reptile is amused or curious about their pain, to a reptile, pain is curious. It's fascinating because there's no ability to explore the other emotions. People in a reptilian state are fascinated by other people's pain and what happens if I do this and what happens if I do that. Now, they're very dangerous to the empathic brain, of course, because that type of dissociation leads to a pain burden that is so high for the empath that they have to shut down. And this is one of the reasons why trauma is contagious. Because when you traumatize an individual and fail to heal that trauma, what the individual's brain understands is that they are in a reptilian environment in which their entire identity is threatened, and no one has the empathy, the love, the decency to respond to that crisis with empathy and compassion and allow the healing, the attunement necessary for the empathic brain to come back online. And so the reptilian brain says, oh, I know how to deal with that. We're in reptilian territory. These people don't know how to love. They will attack whatever is the smallest. So we'll try and get biggest. We'll try to be bigger, and we'll run from those that are bigger than us. That's how we survive in a reptilian environment. And so in the mythological sense, the demonic realm is the realm of the reptilian brain. It's a realm devoid of love, devoid of empathy, filled with fear and survival-based needs. It is hell. It is the most painful form of conscious existence. To be aware of oneself as a reptile living within the reptilian brain. However, the reptile has a place in the wheel of life and in evolution. And its place is to learn within a reptilian environment. For example, if you are in a predatory capitalist paradigm, where anytime your cash flow drops below a certain point, your competitor will try and learn about that vulnerability, and then will, sabotage your truck at that time so that you go bankrupt, because then that means more business for the reptile. And so, when you're in a predatory reptilian environment, empathy is a net negative to survival before you reach independence. And this comes into the state, the maturation process of the child, the adolescent, and then the synergy that is formed between those two, which is the adult. So the child is in the state of need and dependency, and will take whatever form is necessary, including reptilian, to survive and be secure, etc., in that environment. The adolescent is in the state of rebellion, antithesis. Every system, every human system is flawed. The paradigm is flawed. The systems, every single system, education, they're all flawed. Because the human mind, in a place of distinct separation from the whole, cannot create a system, a pattern, that is optimal for relating to the whole it is separate from. And a relationship of opposition, of war, with the larger self is itself symptomatic of a flawed paradigm. Because someone in the reptilian sociopathic state experiences reality as being completely disconnected from them. It's a flawed state at some level because they are interconnected with everything. Just because you cannot feel the connection doesn't mean you're not chewing your own jaw. There is a connection between someone in a numb sociopathic state and someone who is in an empathic state. The empathic person understands that connection. The sociopath does not. Which means that the sociopath is more willing to behave in a way that destroys the life of the empath. And the empath is less willing to destroy the life of the reptile. And in this way, if an empathic person is born into a reptilian environment, they either descend into their reptilian brain and learn to manipulate and survive, or they die or are starved off of life. Because if an empath is generous to a reptile, the reptile will take but will not give, because the reptile has no empathy. And so now the empathic person has less, the reptile has more, and what the reptile does with more is further exploit the vulnerability of the empath caused by the empath being empathic and extending resources to the reptile. That's an unsustainable model, which means that either the empath is killed off in the outer sense of just going bankrupt, getting sick, no one caring for it, etc., or descends into the reptilian brain and manipulates and exploits, etc., in ways necessary to survive surrounded by reptiles. Now, this reptilian state is a stage of evolution. It is a stage of distinction, of individuated consciousness, and it allows for predatory survival and predatory survival skills to be developed and honed and exercised to create more and more complex life forms, ultimately leading to the human being. And so the reptilian state is the coldest state. You talk about being cool. That's in general cultural terms. To be cool is not to have feelings. To be calm and collected, indeed sociopathic. To be cool when your girlfriend breaks up to you is like, no big deal. Meaning, I was never connected to you in the first place. And so I go on my way. I'm cool. No big deal. No change in my identity. You've just made a statement and that's it. I'm cool. Well, in cultures that aspire to be cool, they're aspiring in a sense to retreat into the reptilian brainstem, where there is no feelings other than a certain amount of fear and a certain amount of instinct to survive and win. And within the reptilian framework, the alpha is the one that wins. The alpha is the biggest one. That in the sociopathic combat between reptilian predators, the alpha is the biggest one, the fastest one, the winner. And in this way is breeding a more complex, more successful life form in a sociopathic state. Now, it's no fun to be sociopathic. You can win all you want, you can be King Kong, but there's no love, there's no empathy, there's no sense of connection. The reptilian dominator understands that the only reason that anyone is connected to them in any way is out of the sycophantic alliance that basically says, I'll back you up in your bullying and you'll give me some of your crumbs. And as long as we're happy with that symbiotic relationship, I'll keep serving you as long as you're king of the reptilian power structure, and you'll keep tolerating and throwing me crumbs as long as I serve you. There's no love. There's no empathy. It's cold because no one shows up because they care. They show up out of greed or fear. Now, greed and fear are, understood well in investment communities, and generally they cause problems. So you can only evolve so far within that brainstem before what was liberating in its ability to facilitate survival and growth, meaning an alpha does emerge, and the alpha mates more than the beta. The alpha gets the first choice and mate. And what does the alpha choose? A healthy, symmetrical female. The alpha gets the first choice of mate. And so within the reptilian paradigm, you have the generation of competency in combat, mating with symmetry and health, and through a few million repetitions of that particular algorithm, you get more complex, more competent life forms. And this is the demonic realm, but it is the demonic realm, it is the reptilian realm moving towards competency, moving towards excellence. And at a certain point of competency and excellence, you have abundance. Now, abundance is a tremendously pivotal evolutionary state for a reptile, for a living form. Because at the point where you have more than enough, you no longer have fear of survival and security. You have more than enough. There is no more fear of survival and security. So you start to move into play. You start to move into curiosity. It's no longer all about war. You move into curiosity, you move into play. Now, when you're moving into curiosity, you're moving into understanding. And when you're moving into play, you're moving towards empathy. Tenuously, tenderly, but you're moving towards empathy. You don't want the person you're playing with to be there just because they're afraid of you. You want them to want to play with you because that's more fun. So we're talking about the elevation of human states. But in order for someone to really want to play with you, even when they're not playing with you, you've got to be nice to them, or they don't want to play with you. Now, in order to be nice to them, you have to love them, meaning you have to take the time and the care to understand, to see, to empathize and attune, so that their security and survival goes up in association with you. Then they want to play. And why do you want them to want to play? Because it's more fun. You're moving into empathy. And it doesn't happen until there's more than enough. And so the reptilian paradigm evolves towards competency, and if it is successful, creates more than enough. Now, in highly reptilian cultures in general, this will begin by more than enough for the alpha, for the one on top. But that can spread out meaning even in a dominance hierarchy of atrocities and rape and all of that, and this person just comes out the winner, so they're in the top of the dominance hierarchy. The person who's going through that more than enough starts to have feelings, starts to want more than just survival and security, actually wants real love and belonging, which requires empathy, which requires the evolution out of the reptilian brain into the limbic, the rational, and the empathic, and eventually the transcendent brain. And so there's this movement. Now, the reptile attacks anything smaller than it and runs from anything bigger than it because it's in a fear-based survival paradigm of scarcity. The individual, in survival, trauma, and scarcity, runs from that which is bigger than it, attacks that which is smaller than it, and freezes when neither of those options are available, or adopts a pleaser contract with a higher ranking abuser. Could be a spouse, could be a boss, could be a political figure or a military figure, but I'm going to enter, could be a parent, I'm going to enter a pleasing contract where I will do what pleases you. And you want to hit me and tie me up, and you want me to tell you that that was great? If I please you, you'll take care of me? Okay. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. Hit me again. Enters a pleasing contract with a higher ranking abuser. But that contract stays in place as long as the abuser takes care of and uses their power and rank to protect the one entering that pleasing contract. But we're still dealing in fear here. We're still in the demonic realm. With abundance, we start to see the development of the upper realm. And so where the reptile will attack whatever is smaller than it, the empath does the exact opposite. The empath protects the young, the women, the ones who are most vulnerable. In a sociopathic evolutionary process in a cult, 500-600 years ago, 1,000 years ago, a child was born with a disability. Christian circles, it's not a Christian until it's been baptized, or at least 3 days. Whack it over the head, put it in a hole, let's have another baby. We need healthy babies for us. In other words, we're preying on our young. We'll raise them to a certain point, but then they're going to have to work to keep the tribe alive, to do this and that and the other. And if they're deformed, sickly in any way, they're cursed, they're evil, and we're going to kill them because they're of no use to us in a survival-based cult. We're in the demonic realm. It's cold, it's hard, it's necessary to survive. You got injured? We're going through a snowy mountain pass. The tribe doesn't have a lot of food. Tough luck. We're leaving you behind in the snow. Because you're weak. Because you need help, you can be of no use to us. Because you need help, we're leaving you behind. The tribe survives as practical reptiles. It doesn't love, it doesn't thrive, it doesn't empathize with. You cannot afford to empathize with a child you may have to kill off, or sell off, or leave behind in a raid, or injured in attack. You give it enough thing, you say, well, about 50% of these kids will live, off we go, and the rugged survival of early humanoids, even 1,000 years ago. There's still places on the planet today where an infant that's born that isn't healthy in a certain way will just be thrown in a pit and buried without any thought about it at all. It's just practical. We don't want a person with disabilities in our tribe. It's not an opportunity to love, an opportunity to grow the depth of the human spirit, to learn to care for what is most vulnerable is the crowning state of the transcendent brain, to know that we are one, and to take the resources of the many to give to the few, those who are most vulnerable, is the crowning joy of transcendent empathy. Because it acknowledges, it heals the wound of separation. It heals the wound of being cut off from the whole, the pain of pretending that we are of two different people, the joy of coming together. And so in environments of scarcity, reflected in the incompetence of the life form. In other words, low competence life forms do not create abundance for themselves and others. They may destroy abundance. And so there's scarcity, and with scarcity comes survival of security. And nature wants anything that can survive to survive. Because going back to that playing game of if you've got 1 billion lotto tickets, one of them's bound to win, and that's all nature needs. You know, if nature throws out 10 billion stars, and 1 billion of them become miraculously suitable for intelligent life, and then one of them, Earth, becomes this, that, and the other, nature's just won a home run. Life is going to continue. And if the human species manages to hold it together before it consumes itself, before it kills itself, before it destroys its ecology, and goes out to other life forms, if nature, through the human sex organ of life, because if you think of what's happening with space travel today, nature has produced millions upon millions upon millions of species on planet Earth. And this is the first one that is capable of giving birth to interplanetary life. When a human being puts a rocket 300 feet in the air and puts some of the biggest thrust seen anywhere on the planet to break orbit, to separate from the one, and take complex patterns of energy out into space, out into the womb of the feminine, of the goddess, and leave a particle here and a particle there and a particle here and a particle there that might one day become a new life form. It's as if the planet is having sex through the sex organ of the human species with the neighboring astrological patterns of energy. And if we can create something self-sustaining on Mars or the Moon or any of the other planets, or can get to the point where something can become self-sustaining and go out there, nature has won big. And the more unique human beings there are, the higher the odds. that one of them is a winning ticket. And of course, with a certain amount of free will to alter and shift our identities, our patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, we can turn what is currently not a winning lotto ticket for nature into a winning lotto ticket, where we innovate in a way that allows for good sex between planets. The benefit of the reptilian or the demonic domain is that it takes collapsing newly formed life forms and through competition, through challenge, through combat, learns what works. Because if it doesn't work, you're dead. It's a pretty effective teaching mechanism. Okay, 1,000 of you are going to attack each other. The ones that are still alive had a better system, had a higher level of intelligence. Good. You're going to breed with those symmetrical females. Now we're going to attack each other again. And the ones who survive are going to breed with healthy, symmetrical females. And again, and again, and again, until the level of competency reaches a certain point where we create abundance, where survival is no longer in question, where security is no longer in question. And now what we want is love and belonging. Now, in a halfway decent family and much of our culture, this happens in 10 years. We go through the reptilian uncertain period of survival in a traumatized environment. We learn competency. We go out and create a certain amount of abundance. And some of us are so wounded that we stay in the fear-based reptilian state of relived trauma, but still learn to become more and more competent within that framework. Others of us release the fear, the fight, flight, freeze dynamic and move into play more and creativity more. And then we want love and belonging, which is the first step into the heavenly realms. In the mythological sense, we're now in the heavenly realms, where we learn how to love ourselves. We learn how to love another. We learn how to be loved. This most wonderful state to move from survival, security, love and belonging to actually, and then we go through the child love. And the child and the adolescent love are also very much reptilian, because in the child and adolescent state of life, there is a beginning of a new energy signature. The child, the adolescent, they're trying to find themselves. They're trying to zero in and center on who they are amongst all these diverse energy patterns around them. They're trying to find that. And they settle on something. They get an idea. I want to be like this. I want to be a fire truck driver. I want to be this. I want to be something. I want to find it. But in a relatively sociopathic, because this is a continuum, in a relatively sociopathic culture, we have relatively high levels of narcissism. Because you don't start focusing on other people until you've been deeply loved within. You don't focus on others until you are very deeply secure in your survival and your security and your own self-love, your own self-esteem, your own ability to create and to develop talents and bring them out abundantly into the world, to become part of something bigger than yourself. That's loving another person. Is the first step in that. So now we're in the empathic and the transcendent realm. But the individual who is still insecure about what? The survival of their identity. You know, they want to have blue hair, but everyone hates them when they wear their blue hair. And so it's, am I going to make it? Am I going to be killed? Am I going to be bullied again? How can I survive my identity? And of course, what every adolescent wants desperately in their rebellion, in their counterpoint, and they're trying to say, this is me, is they want security in love and belonging for their unique identity. They want to be understood. They want to be valued. They want to be connected with as something distinct. I'm not you, but I'm still worth loving. But the adolescent is not yet capable of loving themselves. Only the adult can do that. Only an adult can love that adolescent who is desperately trying to separate from often very needy childlike parents who immediately attack the adolescent for not loving them, for not giving more survival and security to them. And so you have this breakdown here where maybe the childlike innocent stage, the narcissistic parent could love because the child will please the parent and do what's necessary to make the parent's needs get met. But then if the life cycle is working as the child moves into that adolescent phase, then the parent rejects the child. I hate you. Because the parent has not learned to love themselves. They haven't become an adult. And so, in one of the beautiful gifts, in the distinctions of this paradigm brought by Robert Bly, the sibling society, what we see is that in many ways we are a cult of siblings. We're a cult of children and adolescents, desperately trying to find their distinct pattern, rebelling against the status quo, looking for blessing, looking for love from an adult that isn't there, because we have yet to develop the spiritual adult in large numbers as a species. A few here and there, but for the most part, a parent looks at their rebelling adolescent through narcissistic eyes. What are you doing to me? What will the neighbors think if they see that blue hair? Your teachers are going to think that I'm a bad parent. It's all about me. I'm a child. I'm worried about approval. I'm trying to survive. How could you do this to me? A child who gave birth to a child who's never grown up into adulthood because there was no adults around me either. I didn't grow up into an adult. I've got to worry about everything you do reflects on me. I don't care about you. You have to care about me. Otherwise, I'm cutting off your allowance. I'm doing this. And so what's important to understand is life is trying to create distinct, intelligent life forms. And it's very difficult for children and adolescents in states of fear, insecurity, and scarcity to give birth to those life forms. The self-absorption that is the predominant state of our culture is the state of a child and perhaps an adolescent who has needs of their own that are insecurely met. And a child cannot meet their own needs. An adolescent cannot meet their own needs. They depend on the theoretical adult who may not have emerged yet, but they still depend upon the other. Look at me, see me, validate me, make me important. Buy this product from me. give me votes, give me likes, to be me. And that doesn't happen in a cult of children and adolescents. What happens is other people say, no, give it to me. And give it to me. And so there's a crisis of how can I continue to evolve into a unique life form when this life form needs other people in a childlike state, in an adolescent state, desperately needs. And in order to get what it needs, must conform and comply to the other life form. In other words, I'll like you, I'll help you, if you do this, and this that I need. Well, by the time you do this, and this that they need, you're not your own life form again. Well, that doesn't matter. I need this. If you do this for me, then I'll do this for you. So you can very much see children and adolescents like little kittens or puppies, or if they're traumatized and abused, as reptiles, all trying to go for scarce resources in attention, scarce resources in presence, scarce resources in validation, scarce resources in competence, scarce resources in energy and value, scarce resources in love and loyalty. It's not there because children and adolescents can't create it. What they can do is manipulate, charm, do side deals, do this, I'll give you this if you give me that. And that's as good as it gets. And if you don't play along with the script, and there is a script, and one of the scripts children like to play is that we're adults. You let me be an adult, and I'll do something nice for you. So tell me how wonderful I am. Aren't I a great president? Aren't I? Oh, very good, very good. I'll sign some bills. I'll give you some money, etc. So let's play it being adult. And I'll give you a position in my court if you'll pretend that I'm an adult. You didn't do it nice enough. And then you have the fuming of the child and adolescent, the caught in poverty of fear and scarcity, of the fuming. It's like they didn't look at me long enough. They was looking at her dress. I'm going to get him. You did the descent down into the demonic realm, the bitch. The bitch. Let's get her. Fight, flight, and freeze. I'm going to get you. No empathy. What's it like to be a reptile over there? What's it like to be a child and adolescent without any of your needs? I mean, finally they had to coerce and do this and have oral sex with someone they didn't like to get the red dress and this and that. And then finally they were going to shine. But you wouldn't give them a second glance. No, they took the spotlight from you. It's terrible. It's like all that for nothing. Oh gosh. Where are the adults? Where are the blessers? The ones who come and say, you're enough. Welcome. There's an abundance of life for you here. Welcome. We accept you. We understand you. You want to say this thing and do this and that. Wonderful, wonderful. We don't have any needs to look good. We're enjoying your becoming. We're enjoying your dream. The weaving of a new pattern of consciousness, of a new identity out of your dream. We want to see what you come up with. We've got things covered. Enjoy the process of becoming an adult. And it takes an adult to give birth to an adult. And it takes that adult to give birth to another adult. It takes self-love to give birth to the adult inside. As long as the child is hated and feared, as long as the adolescent is shamed and humiliated, inside you cannot become an adult. Because an adult is the one who loves. First the inner child and adolescent, and then itself, And then, because that's what creates the synergy of a loved child and a loved adolescent is an adult. Then the adult loves itself. And then, because it's more fun, the adult starts to love others. Because it's more fun. All evolution is moving from unconscious suffering to conscious suffering, from helpless suffering to self-determined suffering, from self-determined suffering to self-determined mediocrity, from self-determined mediocrity to self-determined good, from good to great, to conscious, sustainable fun and grace. That's the pinnacle of consciousness. That's where it's all going, for no other reason than it's more fun than consciously suffering. Meaning, once you have mastery in all of life's algorithms, whether it's the sociopathic reptilian, demonic algorithm, whether it's the human algorithm, whether it's the adult algorithm, every single one of nature's algorithms is moving towards competency, towards mastery. And when you have mastery, you can choose. Do I want to consciously suffer today? Do I want to have a consciously ecstatic experience today? You can choose only when you have mastery. So nature ensures, through all the algorithms, through the whole learning protocol of life, nature ensures generation after generation, planet after planet, species after species, the movement towards mastery. The totally masterful person who can suffer as much as they want and know why and how to do that, who can have as much fun as they want and know how and why to do that sustainably, always chooses fun. Why? Because it's more fun. It's the only self-referential value at the end. It's enough. It's fun because it's fun. I don't need anything more than that. Why do you do that? Because it's fun. Why do you want to have fun? Because it's fun. Conscious, sustainable fun is the end point of every game of consciousness. It's where it all inevitably ends up. It's where it already has ended up. But we're on the journey. We're on the continuum. We feel fun out of our control and we don't like it because then someone knocks our fun away from us and how dare they? I feel so helpless. I'll just consciously suffer. They can't knock that away from me. Now you've moved from being outside referential to inside referential. It's evolution. You're becoming an individual. I'm suffering. No one's going to take it away from me. They're not. But can I learn how to feel a little better and no one's going to take that away from me? Can I do that slowly and slowly? Can I do that? And once I get there, once I can masterfully create sustainable fun, and no one can take it away from me, I've internalized it. I know how I did it. I know how I created the abundance out of which I did that. I know how to do that. Now that I know how to do that, it's no fun to suffer. I mean, it's fun to suffer when fun is unsustainable. Why? Because disappointment hurts. When you get up and climb the pinnacle of fun and then it crashes again, it's no fun. Like, I don't want to climb up there again and fall down. I'll just stay down here. But when you can incrementally build the fun, step by step, each step of the way, it's more fun to have fun. And it isn't, a yo-yo knocked over by other people, I'll just be miserable. It's sustainable. Well, we have a less than 1% of the population, perhaps, of our species is somewhere in that terrain. Maybe 1% is. Take all the people on the planet today, about 1% perhaps has mastered the art of creating conscious, sustainable fun. And it's fun to stay there. It's fun to help other people come, because it's more fun to have more people having fun than less people. Why? Because it's fun. It's easier. It becomes easier and easier to sustain the energy of fun, the more fun that is created out there. But it takes a step there. The pivot point is trauma. Can a people heal the trauma in the wounded child, in the wounded adolescent? If they can, they become an adult. If they become an adult, they're capable of self-love. So it's kind of a riddle. If you love the inner child, you become an adult. If you are an adult, you're capable of love. It's a riddle, which is why it's so much easier if you have parents and therapists and other things that love you and can love you and want to love you, and why it's so hard to solve that riddle. If I don't love myself, because I don't love myself, I want to love myself, but I don't love myself, and I don't love myself because I don't love myself, that can go on for generations. It can certainly go on for decades. But when one adult shows up and pours love in there, the adult emerges in the other. As the adult emerges, the act of the adult is always to love. That's how you know you're dealing with an adult. Because only someone who has loved themselves enough to create the abundance, to move beyond scarcity and fear in the reptilian brain, love their inner child, only that person is capable of loving you. And if they're not capable of loving you, they're not capable of loving themselves. And if they're not capable of loving themselves, the people around them were not capable of loving that inner child and inner adolescent. It's a high level of technology. Grace, mastery, fun, abundance. But it is also immensely self-perpetuating. The heavenly realms in the mythological paradigm release the transcendent brain. The transcendent brain is aware of its interconnectivity with all that is. It is thus aware of how and why to partner with all that is to create beauty, truth, goodness, life. It's aware of how and why to do that because it loves what is. It loves life. It loves the other. It is the escape from the isolated, fear-based, limited reptilian ego into an awareness of the self in relationship with all that is, with love. All militarization, vanish. All fear, vanished. All pain, 90% vanished. You get rapid iteration in that framework. Rapid creativity. Beauty, truth, exploding. A new child is born. Adults are present. That life form is exactly what that cult or culture needs in order to move to an even higher state of grace and evolution. And you have adults wise enough to know it, wise enough to love that child, to grow that child. into a unique life form connected to their transcendent brain, which means they know how to love, and which means that all of the wealth and riches of that individuated self are shared because it's fun, because it's more fun to share than to hoard, because it's more fun to give than to control. It's more fun. So, in the Chinese mythologies, if you watch something like Ice Fantasy or Eternal Love, beautiful doorways into Chinese and Asian forms of culture, which have a different relationship with color, with beauty, with music. It's much more about the presence, much more about the yin in just the medium. The demons have a role that is a respected role at the table of power. That's something a mature culture is capable of comprehending. To understand that the crocodiles, either in human brains or in animal form, are on an evolutionary journey. They represent part of the color wheel of the process from starting off with the one, the descent, the rebellion, the differentiation, the maturing, the learning, and the coming back into partnership. That this is the cycle of life. And if you cannot love each part of the cycle, then you cannot love life. If you cannot love life, you cannot love yourself because you are a part of life. The demonic realm is the reptilian brain. It is survival of the fittest. It is survival of the alpha. It is might makes right. It is preying upon the weak. It is exploiting, lying, cheating, without empathy, on a journey towards competency, on a journey towards abundance, on a journey towards transcendence, on a journey towards love. A 180-degree turn takes place in the program there. The crocodile fights that which is smaller than it. The bully attacks it, what is weaker than it. The empath extends grace and understanding to the smallest portion and asks for help from the larger portion to protect and nourish what is small, what is needy, what is weak, and heals the need and heals the weakness through competency and abundance. Now, before competency is at a high level, this can sink the crowd. Meaning when you have a low competency group, it's barely surviving as it is. And if you have to carry two people on stretchers at the same time, we're too incompetent to do the job. So who are we going to let go? The strong one who can fight a predator for us, who can make us look good in public? No. We're going to let go the weak ones. We're going to drop the corpses by the wayside. We'll bury the disabled children. Carry on, right? It's a low level of competency. It is abundance which emerges out of a high level of competency that leads to empathy. Because you cannot care for another more than you can care for yourself. So, a child, an adolescent, is going to manipulate, because life is still trying to form unique identities, even if you're dealing with a world of children and adolescents without adults. Life still wants unique children and adolescents, since the odds of survival go up with diversity. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword in the adolescent stage, because the adolescent stage is so sociopathic, metaphorically and actually speaking, that you've got unique forms of sadistic, destructive behavior, just like the person chewing a hole in their mouth because they can't feel anything because of the Novocaine. It's a dangerous state in the life cycle, when the adolescent could destroy itself and its host body, because it's all it knows is separation, dissociation, and pain. It doesn't know how to love itself because it isn't being loved. It's a very, very traumatic crisis in any evolutionary cycle to, in a sociopathic state, dissociate from the herd, differentiate from the planet, from the people, from all that is. I'm never going to love again. I have no idea how to relate to anything. I'm all alone. No one cares about me. It's too expensive to care about anyone. I'm just trying to find my signature when I really have to worry about survival. Maybe I'll just please this person and they'll give me some. So terrifying. So terrifying. Eventually, through trial and error, through pain, misery, eventually you have a few adults emerge. And if they are able to survive as adults, they give birth to a few more, and a few more, and the virus of adulthood, which is more fun, more competent, more abundant than the virus of children and adolescents pretending to be adults. Because in the child and adolescent stage, it's all about manipulation and control. Up, you didn't do that for me, I'm not going to do that for you. Okay, I'll do it for you, not because I'm an adult, but because you're not going to do it for me. And so you better do this, or I'm not going to do that for you. And you have all this political machinations. It's basically a day in the White House, or in any democracy or dictatorship. It doesn't matter that much. If you're dealing with children and adolescents, everyone's trying to get their identity to look good, to be better, and it's never enough for the child and adolescent, because you don't get to be enough until you're an adult, until you've transcended the identity of your cult, and you've gotten a sense of the unique signature of your soul, the unique voice. That's you. And felt the blessing of the spiritual adult, seen and unseen. And you know it's enough. The adult, the spiritual adult, is the first ego state of development where I am enough. I don't have to constantly get more and this and that and the other. And that's the first one that can start to give. Because they're already done, because it's more fun, because I am enough, and I have a lot that I can give. A lot of the fear, and this goes into the domain of kind of new agey teenagers and young adults trying to be spiritual, is how can I be spiritual when this one's bullying me this way and this one, and then I want to be nice, but then I'm dealing with a reptile and you're ruining my identity. I want to be nice, but if I'm nice, you hurt me. You're ruining it. get out of my life, I want to be this person. You're dealing with an adolescent and a child trying to, manipulate and with the world that isn't cooperating to help us be the identity that we think we need to be lovable. Because we don't love ourselves as it is, so we have to be this and that and the other. And no one else is deeply loving us as it is, as we are. And so who is the lovable identity? It's this person who doesn't get angry and who doesn't do this and this. But how can I not be angry when you're doing this and this and this? Now I can't be loved. Oh, I've got to get you to change. I've got you to all this stuff. And if you don't change, then I'm not going to change. And it's in the codependency of a sibling society. So saying and seeing all of this does not change any of the dynamic for any one of us. But it can still be a helpful metaphor, a story for a time to help understand the progression we're on. In particular, this very interesting 180 degrees that goes from the reptilian brain of attacking whatever is smaller than you and running from what is bigger than you and having no empathy other than what's politically expedient to look good, into this place where now you're doing the exact opposite, where Christ washes the feet of the disciples. It's a new paradigm. Caesar beats the disciples, rapes the slaves, because the least among you is the one to be disposed of and to be used to serve the alpha on the quest of competency, on the quest of becoming. We're dealing with the reptilian brain. Forgiveness, washing the feet of the one who is lower rank. When the larger one serves the smaller one, when the therapist serves the patient, when the parent serves the child, when the government serves the people, when the king serves and protects the courtiers, the citizens of the kingdom, you've made the switch to the empathic brain. You've made the switch from Caesar to Christ. When Christ worships the disciples, washes their feet, is honored to love them. You've gone from the narcissistic, exploitive parent to the nurturing spiritual adult, the spiritual parent. It's a 180-degree pivot. That pivot releases trust and trustworthiness, releases partnership and collaboration, releases synergy. What 5 people can do with trust and trustworthiness, with empathy, with partnership, collaboration, and synergy is more potent than what 100 people can do out of fear, out of fight, flight, and freeze in the reptilian program. You don't get to empathy without abundance. The reptilian brain's job is through fear, through pain, through domination, to elevate the pattern to a level of competency able to generate abundance. When the abundance is there, there is the flexibility to pivot 180 degrees into the empathic brain, where you now do the exact opposite. You see, nature keeps the gazelle herd alive and alert with lions. And the lion always eats the sick one in the pack. And as a result, the healthiest gazelles, which outrun the lion the most, mate with the other healthy gazelles. And the pack of gazelles evolves. No morality, no consciousness, no cruelty, just life getting better at life. And the lion eats the weakest gazelles in the pack until there are no weak gazelles. And then the lion has to run faster and grow stronger to catch the next weakest gazelle. First the lion starts with the little old lady. Oh, that was easy. Yeah, but now you've killed the little old lady. Now you got to work harder or you starve. See, it's nature's game of competition, of competency. The lions have to keep getting better with each iteration. The gazelles have to get better with each iteration in a beautiful dance. No cruelty, malice involved. And life gets better. But at a certain point of life getting better, you develop consciousness. And at a certain point of consciousness, one transcends one's reptilian instinct, the demonic realm, through abundance and competence. Because it's more fun. And now you're in the heavenly realms of the empathic and the transcendent brain. But you can't get there without competence. You can't get there without the abundance created by competence. Because it is too painful for the empathic brain to wake up surrounded by starving reptiles. So it doesn't. It's frozen over. It goes numb. What's left? The reptilian brain. Every human being has the capacity in 15 years to gracefully move through this cycle from trauma, fear, reptilian, emotion, limbic brain, reactivity, rationality, empathy, and transcendence. There have been tribes in our world's history that have initiated adults repeatedly and reliably, sometimes with the addition of a psychedelic snuff, to give that first glimpse that we're connected with everything else, to remember the song and the chime, the sound, where we are in that song, to remember, here I am, there's my note. That's what I came in to play. Some cultures and tribes would not trust a human being until they were initiated, because they understood that the cult is dangerous to the cult. The brainwashed programming of this is the way we do things that every child adopts will not take the cult into culture, into the future. For that we need initiated men and women. And so until they had a transcendent experience where they found themselves in the landscape and language of transcendent space, they were as likely to be a danger to their cult as they were to be an ally. But once they touched the transcendent landscape, they could bring back gifts that would lead to the transformation of the people. They could be trusted. At 15 years old, they were more adult than many of us today. It's not about time. It's about competency. Competency in culture, competency in consciousness, having maps that work. Thank you for joining.